I do believe we have audio and video now on Substack. Okay. Apologies for the interruption. I'm sure Jesse will be here in just a moment to tell me as my sound guy on Substack. Okay. So let me get to reading while we wait for Jesse to tell me whether or not we're fucked on Substack. So, hi Joseph, welcome. So there's this idea, there's a cocoon that work creates. Totally agree. But the problem here is the one that we construct. Yes, thank you, Jesse. Okay, so let me recap. You're awesome. Thank you so much. Of course, there's always problems, but I will say it was my own error. So we're talking about what work does, right? So work, regardless of like the exploitation and whatever. If we go back to the like beginning of time, Hannah Arendt's Homo Faber. Work is about creating something external, creating something outside of ourselves. And one of the things that Foley says, I think Foley, Grattan, one of these authors, says that work creates a canvas or a cocoon where we can kind of climb inside and transform ourselves. So totally valid thing. But there's a problem here. The self that we construct is simplified. It's often created for the consumption of our colleagues. So, well, I don't see this as a problem, but this is what they're saying the problem is. If you're down with Profilicity, then you're totally fine with constructing a work profile. So it's not to say that the person you are at work doesn't bleed through to other things. It absolutely does. Like there and vice versa. So, I mean, I don't think anybody can. This brings to mind Severance. Like, when is the new season of Severance coming out? Because there is no severing who you are in different domains, and we haven't talked about Severance in the context of our new tool, Profilicity. Severance wants us to be 100% prophilic in that we have to recreate ourselves in multiple environments without knowledge of those other environments. So severance isn't, I got to make a video about that. Because severance would be a very interesting thing to talk about in terms of Profilicity. Why didn't I think about that? I'm going to talk about that. Let me think about that. I'll make something about it. So the problem is the loss of identity involved in surrender to the group. Now, this is weird for a collectivist to say. This is some weird shit. You don't ever hear collectivists say shit like this. That loss of identity when surrendered to a group is a problem. I don't think this is a problem so much. It's a problem if it's exclusive, right? If there's only one place where you go every day and that is your exclusive identity, I think that is the problem. So indeed, in the workplace, we hide our true feelings by finding that's not true. In the workplace, we put a mask, right? The mask has fused onto the face. And it's so funny because this is exactly like what I think about all the time. And just posted on my story about the Fuji song, The Mask. Like you wear a mask, but the question is how much of you comes through. It's never exclusive. So I don't like the way they're framing this. We are networked, but such networks are pathological. They are often partial in nature and tie us to others working equally as hard as ourselves, more likely persuading us that we are not working hard enough. Now, that's true. I don't think this issue of them being partial is the issue at all. All of these networks are partial. Every network you're a part of is partial. That's totally not a problem. Now, the problem is that if we feel like coerced, right? If you feel coerced, the whole thing of you're not working hard enough type shit, that's an issue. That's street slavery, right? Work harder. Just writing it up. Even those initiatives that purport to prioritize well-being and mental health are founded upon an organization's commitment to the quantification of their employees. So the more that organization responds to those needs, the less individual their employees can be. Totally agree. The concern here is that the contemporary workplace has reached new levels of control in this regard. As Moore suggests, the contemporary workplace not only seeks to quantify and hence control the body and the mind in the name of the workplace agility, it effectively seeks to do the same with the worker's experience of emotions, so that ultimately the personalized nature of work is indeed intensified, but only in such a way that the anxieties of precarity come closer and closer to the surface. So I think about this a lot in terms of these kind of people you see and you deal with a lot, like what Angela Nagel calls normies. I mean, other people call them normies too. But they're kind of people who feel like they have like no flavor, they have no personality, they have no interests, or if they do have interests, they're like their interests are very generic. The interests are very boring. They are very safe. And so I do think the corporatization of human beings leads to this risk aversion where we will only do and say things that are within this confined box, something very prescribed, something very safe. So think about what you can do at work for like team building activities. So I proposed a couple things. A lot of people I know have proposed things. Can't go rock climbing, can't go on a hike, can't go swimming, can't do anything, nothing physical, because that would exclude people with different, physical abilities and situations. There's a lot of things you cannot do when it comes to like fun and creativity, especially. You don't want to alienate anybody. And the number one rule of all of this stuff in business is to mitigate risk, especially in a litigious society where you are likely to be sued for anything you can be. Certain clients get a certain me specific to interaction. Yeah, yeah. I think there's no way around that. There's definitely a profilicity, but there's profilicity in every environment, no matter what it is. Social environments have this as well. So I think that argument is pretty weak. Their argument that it's the work network and the work profile we put forward is partial. All of them are, and that it's pathological because you have to surrender something to the group. You always have to surrender something to a group. I suppose the question is, are we a person who puts on different social masks depending on the environment, or are we many different people that change within different environments rather than wearers of masks? Well, the masking situation, that's a good question, Jesse. Masking, I think, is when you're putting something on top of yourself, right? You're changing who you are. And you're right, that implies that you are a person, and then you're going to put this thing on top of you that is completely different than you. So the mask thing is, I think, it feels and seems pathological that you have to lie or put on a front for something for your own safety. I think a mask can be worn for fun, but I think a lot of times people wear it for safety reasons. It's not just about fun. Do I wear a mask at work, or am I just a different person? Yeah, these are questions that correspond to the book we read in March, which is You and Your Profile by Hans Moore and Paul D'Ambrosio. So these are great questions. And Mueller would say that it's a combination of things. Like, yes, it's yes and no, right? It's like, yes, you are you, but within you, you have all of these different profiles. And I guess the authentic version of you, this is my words, not these are my words, not his. The authentic version of you is one that accepts and understands all of these profiles and incorporates them wherever you see fit. That's your authenticity, in my opinion. If you have any authenticity, it's about how you deal with the need for these different profiles. Mask feels pathological, but that's the word that's used here. Regarding vagueness, people do not want to give narcissistic and coercive people ammunition. Faith and reason, great point. No, you're exactly right. And I was thinking about this too. Like in dealing with narcissism, a therapist will say, or an online like therapy speaker, whatever I've heard is like gray rock. Don't give them anything, right? To manipulate you or to harm you. And so you're right. I think the corporation at its core is a narcissistic endeavor. Its sole pursuit is for the promulgation of self and profit. And so if we treat the corporation like a person, which Citizens United does, it's absolutely narcissist. It only cares about itself. And it only cares about the components of itself, which would be its workers or people, insofar as they are elements of what keep it running. So what the people give the corporation is nothing, right? And what you would give people who you feel are harmful, narcissistic, and only concerned with the bottom line would be nothing. So I think you're exactly right. And increasingly, we feel we have to put on that mask as protection. So I think the problem is not in masking. The problem is not in prophilicity. The problem is not around work or any of this stuff. The problem is around the chokehold that the current corporate environment and economic environment and capitalistic environment have created for people to work. It's unhealthy because we do have to put on a mask for protection. And so what kind of person does that develop? If you have to go into your cocoon every day and mask up in a sense to protect yourself, then you are creating a self that is going to be like used to toxic fumes and kind of take that self outside into the world and probably start to create that world as well outside. So great point. Great discussion. Do you make money from social media? I don't know. Do you count like a few dollars? How much money? How much money would you say is a threshold to say yes, I make money from social media? From my writing, my annual revenue on my Substack is like $2,500. So yeah, and then from social media, I don't know, what did I make last year? Like $100 on TikTok or something. My thesis is on the dynamics of narcissism and coercive manipulation in modern churches. Oh, yeah, brilliant, brilliant, Randall. Would love to have you as part of the discussion. I think that it's very relevant, and I think churches operate like business now. So I think this is very relevant to the discussion. So even those initiatives that purport to prioritize well-being basically fuck it up. So Grattan talks about the freedoms to choose that are created by new forms of work. Such places provide the worker with the opportunity to create kinds of social capital that may make our working lives feel less precarious. For him, things aren't perhaps as bad as they seem. He argues that the successes and competition are no longer as influential in our working lives as they were in the past, and that work is becoming increasingly implicated by more inclusive forms of social capital. Interesting. In a world in which earning and money and achieving status becomes less important as a means of validation, the individual is freer to experience in a less constrained fashion through friendship and mentoring, for example, so that money is just one element of a broader gambit of the experience of work in which the self gives as well as receives. In the traditional deal, it is purchases that have defined who we are in society. But as the future proofed deal emerges, it's possible that our work will be defined less by what we consume and more by the experiences we produce. That would be all well and good if we didn't need work, if we didn't need money from work. If we didn't go to work for money, that would be fine. But we do. Everybody goes to work for money. So, Gravin, I don't know what the fuck you talking about. That's a very idealistic perspective, but I don't know anybody. We all joke like, "Oh, I'd still work if I didn't need the money." I don't know a single person like that, really. I mean, it was me for like half a year. I like to play this game. I told my colleagues when I started, like, I don't need this job. And I didn't, to be fair, at that time, and I still probably don't. But in a sense, I do. I need this job to get to my financial goals to where I want to be. So we all work because we need to. So I don't know what Grattan's talking about, but I don't buy it. The emphasis here on the production of work experiences rather than their consumption is important. The temptation is to foresee a future in which the worker is liberated not only in the conditions which support the act of work, the opportunity to take a break, to play a game of ping pong, or give oneself some thinking time on a colorful arrangement of futuristic sofas, for example, but in the actual doing of the task itself, so that the individual is less constrained by the type parameters within which his or her allocated tasks reside. Yeah, this is totally fucked up. Totally, I think, inaccurate. Because if you were here for last month's reading, which I just posted the slides for in on Substack, the eye of the master, per Roman Alquati, is watching so that it can take all of these little weird freedoms you have, all of these little things that you're doing, these quirky little tasks and activities you're doing, and construct them into a pseudo worker. And then it can model the best workers, the worst workers, and just eliminate all of the shitty habits that the worst workers have. And if you don't fall in line with the best workers, coercion, control, manipulation. So this is like, again, this is all well and good, but it's for a purpose. So the reason you are given all of these little freedoms, all of these little fun little novelties and enrichments is so that you will work better and they can watch how you work, record it, and simulate it. It's not a fucking altruistic endeavor. The fuck? Like, honestly, people, come on. So Grattan, I've had enough of Grattan, by the way. Grattan argues that this kind of world is achievable. Who the fuck is Grattan? Hold on, let's look. We gotta look. I guarantee we're not going to like who this is. Grattan 2014. Well, let's see what we find. Just with a quick Google search. Mm-mm-mm. Linda Grattan. Oh, Linda. Linda Grattan. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make fun of her name. Facebook began the digital ID. Yeah, of course. Linda sounds like Karen to me. Soft and hard models of resource management. She's a professor, organizational behavior. Yeah. So she's a business scholar. So you have to take this with a grain of salt. Anybody who is an organizational scholar, first of all, okay, let's go back to B.F. Skinner. It's all behavioral economics. It's all how do we and why have behavioral economics been put forth and funded? Because the corporation can use all of these data to make its organization more efficiency. Linda means beautiful. Okay, Linda. Can't stand you. I just had to look that up real quick. Who the fuck she was? I got it. I got it saved. Linda. Okay, so in a world where earning and money become less important, then the individual is freer to experience a less constrained fashion through friendship and mentoring, for example. So that money is just one element of a broader gambit of the experience of work in which the self gives as well as receives. True. In the traditional deal, purchases define it. Now it's something else. So the emphasis here on the production of work experiences. Oh, I already read this. I'm so sorry. So Grattan argues that this is achievable if we get to a point where we can think more deeply about work so that restraint becomes the priority and work becomes more purposeful as a result. This is an attractive prospect, but one that does not sufficiently take into account the broader ideological context in which the shifts she describes are taking place. Hello? Hello? In part, the problem is that the word experience inevitably implies a kind of freedom to choose, a locus of control, and can never be played out in the way that we as individuals and consumers might imagine. Such freedoms are illusory. The freedom to enjoy what appears to be a more balanced and fulfilling work life is fraught with compromise. Capitalism is in the process of reinventing work not because it frees up the worker, but because it allows him or her to feel they can be free. The more we seek a balanced work experience, the more our self is at the heart of how we see the workplace, and the more we are destined to be mere playthings of the experiences. I'm sorry, I totally agree. Boricua, I'm sick. I had cough for 3 weeks. I was sick and it won't go away. I now have asthma. Okay? The impact I'm sorry. The impact of work as experience on our lives is potentially profound. Social change is seductive. Ransom thus criticizes the work of McCannell and other theorists concerned with the rapidity of social change for over-exaggerating the extent to which production is becoming less exploitative. Yeah, totally. Specifically, Ransom's concern is that the theoretical women fashion came to see work as a form of masquerade and self-expression that said more about the determination of theory to prove a postmodern about how to reveal the world of work was actually changing. The point here is that although there might be, well, some kind of amorphous generic sense in which work has become more flexible, such flexibility is actually provided on the whole by the worker who makes themselves more available and willing to work hours they wouldn't worked in the past. Inevitably, the need for the job to be done is far more significant than who does it. Also, when they do it, the worker is disposable. The future of work is therefore likely to remain one of alienation. Of course, as I have already acknowledged, there are such things as creative, fulfilling, rewarding jobs, but many people are inevitably denied access to such opportunities. Okay, so the future of work doesn't sound that great. Like more free, but less free. I was all excited for today too. What a buzzkill. I would say I've been thinking about this a lot too. Like there's a culture of work that is different even than 10 or 15 years ago now, like post COVID. The work culture can fall into two different buckets. You can have a work culture where you are just put to the task constantly. And I would say these are the dumber work environments. They're cruder. They're ran by people who actually don't understand this part of work that they're talking about. And it's like the kind where you're measuring people's productivity constantly. You're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And then there's the more flexible work environment where you are basically left to do what you want to do, how you want to do it and just observe behind the scene. And they don't say shit to you. They just go, oh, you did your stuff? Great. Okay, we will note everything that you have done on your laptop in the last 48 hours. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And that's it. And you get your paycheck and you move on. Now, the former kind of work environment is shit-tastic. And they're going to be beat out by the latter because the latter is driven by success and outcomes. The former is driven by false KPIs and metrics that are meant to indicate they serve as a surrogate for productivity, but they really don't match up. And a lot of times, the Goodhart's law takes hold, and you got a bunch of fucking KPIs and metrics that are just spreadsheets on spreadsheets on spreadsheets, and mostly people are hiding them. So these kinds of environments are where people make whole jobs out of faking the work versus the people who actually get the work done. Um, that not only do they enjoy a more comfortable life, but they're more heavily exploited as well. So it may feel like the spreadsheet type jobs are exploiting you more, but actually, I hadn't thought about this. Actually, those jobs are less exploitative in the long run. Like they're just generating false fucking noise. But it will all come out in the wash. It will all of this shit will come out in the wash where they will go, this works, this doesn't. But yeah, sure, we're more free. Absolutely. So I try to establish that what you see in the workplace is not always what you get. And recently it's become sort of a privileged ideological space for the reproduction of the consumer society. So let's think about how the relatively tenuous hold of the workplace as an experience is maintained. Yes, AI will replace them. Agreed, faith and reason. And the only way it won't is if we create yet another simulation. There will be another type of simulation that's created. Almost, I don't want to say like what's happening in India because India is not exactly a simulation. Um, in India they have a lot of jobs, and the jobs are fucking dumb though. It's like one person stamps something, the next person moves it down the line. The jobs are beyond meaningless. But it's kind of a simulation of what's happening. And the funny thing is, it's like, you guys ever heard the term API? But like the funny thing is that it's an acronym for a person in India because there are so many people in India just doing kind of button clicking jobs. Literally, click farms are, you know, people in India clicking all day long. So it's not going to be more productive. It's just going to be more inclusive in a sense. So how's this maintained? One version of events is that all the insecurities and uncertainties to which I've referred, as Southwood puts it, are artificially maintained. This is literally what I'm just saying. In this sense, the whole manifestation of work as an experience is a state of mind. The sense of perpetual precariousness is presented to us as non-negotiable, as an inevitable consequence to social change. We are, according to Southwood, paralyzed into a mode of bemused inaction. We're told that the world of work is an endless phantasmagoria of possibility, choice, and self-branding, when the mundane reality is more likely one of repetition, frustration, and career progressions that are always just out of our reach. The quote from Southwood is such preoccupations divert attention away from wider abstract social or political concerns and onto a continual anxious self surveillance. The constant precariousness and restless mobility, compounded by a dependence on restlessly updating market driven technology and the scrolling CGI of digital media, suggest a sort of cultural stagnation, a population revving up without getting anywhere. The result is a kind of frenetic inactivity. We are caught up in a cycle of nonstop inertia. That's the kind of thing that I was talking about with the companies that just manage your KPIs and just watch what you do and are on your ass constantly. That's that frenetic inactivity. I think that's a great term. I really like that. I'm going to keep that. I'm putting that in the PowerPoint for the summary at the end of the month, which y'all should join. Also, I'm actively thinking about what kind of game we're going to play for this. I think I like this. I like the thing we did this month, and I'm trying to think, how am I going to top that? Frenetic inactivity, page 73. It's like the adventurous views from a treadmill. Ugh, totally. I was raised to never call out, never miss a day of work, perfect attendance. And then I read The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, who basically says how sad is a life where you don't have any reasons compelling enough to call you out. Yes, very sad, Jesse. So the point is twofold. First, human beings are complicit. We are married to the world of uncertainty and insecurity. It's what we know. We struggle with the everyday realities of such a world. And however we might grumble about it, we mostly accept it passively and uncritically. Second, the emergence of the workplace as a stage for experiential exploration is a double edged sword. The worker is expected to grin and bear the strains of contemporary workplace while reassuring him or herself that however stressed and anxious they might be, it's not so bad because work's just better than it used to be, isn't it? There's been a significant rise in work related mental health problems across the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development nations. The expectation is that workers should just cope. The problem is that the individualization of work is actually undermining the degree to which they are able to do so. Blindly following is dangerous. Well, faith and reason, blindly following faith or reason is dangerous. Would you not agree? Is that too far? Did I go too far? We'll talk about it later. Join the Discord. 30 years ago, during my student holidays, I worked on at Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels are the kind of meals that might be heated and delivered to old people unable to cook for themselves. My experience was eye-opening, and one aspect of my experience remains vivid in the memory. I worked on a production line. I'd stand there, ice cream scoop in hand, placing a portion of peas on a passing aluminum tray. It says aluminum tray, alongside the other components of the meal that passed in front of me. What was interesting about this, though I didn't think at the time, was how the factory employees were self-managed. There ensued a highly competitive atmosphere that ensured that the employees on one production line would constantly look to outdo their neighbors. They would do so by producing more meals than their competitors. There was no sense that this was something that was imposed by management, but it felt like a question of pride. As I discovered to my cost, woe betide any individual worker who was in any way responsible for interrupting the happy progress of the line. These employees appeared to be the authors of their own overworked demise. They effectively conspired to ensure their daily routine was unrelenting. The pseudo excitement of the competition symbolized their complicity in the process in which they were engaged. Now, hold on. I thought Meals on Wheels was a volunteer thing. Interesting. Okay, I think we're about to learn something here. No doubt such working conditions exist nationwide, and of course, in some parts of the world more than others. There are more places than the kind of future thinking workspaces describe. However, the workplace is much changed, and there is no doubt that more attention is nowadays paid to the workplace, paid in the workplace to the individual experience. In the UK, for example, legislation on health and safety, unconscious bias, and the like has certainly facilitated change for good. But the point here, at the risk of stating the obvious, is that the work is still work. And the individualization of the workplace, as far as the worker who has been privileged enough to experience it, inevitably does little more than camouflage that fact. The workplace has been reimagined, at least partially as part of a broader, unsustainable, and unpredictable gig economy as a place for personal exploration. But such exploration simply reinforces the power of capitalism to perpetuate the complicity of the employee. So I think this makes sense because if the workplace is characterized by this kind of monopolistic totalitarian perspective, then yes, any kind of enrichment within that workplace goes towards the eye of the master. Not exclusively, though. So if you become enriched as a person through your work, you can take that outside of the workplace insofar as some place outside the workplace still exists. So work, I feel like work is becoming more all encompassing, and we can make that argument. But I think I agree mostly with what's been said in this chapter. Now, the part about Meals on Wheels is interesting because I thought Meals on Wheels was a nonprofit, but that wouldn't make sense. So a lot of these altruistic, if it wasn't a nonprofit, that would make sense because a lot of these altruistic seeming companies tend to try to motivate workers by the greater good. So, like healthcare, for instance, they're like, oh, you're all here for the greater good. You're all AI. AI is a big one where people are like quitting huge jobs. Like, who was the executive? There was an executive that quit their job at like Google or someplace to go just be a software engineer at Anthropic. Think about it, Anthropic. Like, they're trying to sell you on the altruistic component, and by so doing, they make you believe that you're actually doing work for the greater good, not for the profit of the company. And so you'll feel more free, you'll do better work. All that makes sense. The grunt class doesn't get this luxury. I don't know if that's true because think about it. If you're scooping peas onto a plate, isn't that the grunt class? I think it depends on the type of work you're doing. Like construction, I would say, is notoriously insensitive to this kind of thing. Construction doesn't give a fuck mostly. They're like, get there, grind it out, pour the concrete, do what you got to do. But I would say there are places that feel more altruistic, like this kind of thing, Meals on Wheels, that can get away with that, even for the rent class. Malcolm Gladwell said people today work a lot harder, more hours compared to previous generations. That's a myth to claim that generations worked a lot harder. They worked a fraction of hours. Yeah, I think there's something to it. It's like it's more intensified now than it ever was. So work is one of the primary arenas in which the experience society is played out. The impact of experience on, this is so true. And I'm going to back up 1 second too. Because think about what drives economic flow at this point. You guys all know the chart that I've referred to several times of like the 9 AI companies or whatever, they're all just feeding each other. So a lot of money is spent flushing through corporate America. I think about if I go to a conference, I'm going to a conference. Oh, if I go to a lot of conferences, flight, parking, um, Uber, hotel, food, enrichment activity. All of the shit is centered around the work experience, the fees for the conference. All of that shit is money spent, and my expense report's probably like $10,000 a month, maybe. And all of that money is spent in the pursuit of acquiring more capital. So it's like the work economy, the work experience economy is like out of fucking control. In a world, no, sorry. The availability of an experience and the consumer's ability to use that experience in the construction of self is tempered by social, cultural, economic circumstance, even when it simply serves to extend the ways in which the worker can be exploited. In a world so tightly bound up with notions of aspiration or self exploration, we're nonetheless trained to believe that fulfilling work experiences are a right, and that the inability to secure such a job should be something to be embarrassed about. I sit here as the most privileged of workers, secure in the comfort zone of my sofa and free of the diversions of the office. I've had a productive working and writing day. I feel like myself because it's through my writing that I am able to find myself. But who I am and what I am constructed of is not of my own making. It is the product of a world that frees me up and ties me down. What this adds up to is something of a mirage. The workplace cannot give us what we demand because capitalism is ahead of us in that queue. The world in which we live has created a curious state of affairs in which we have moved from looking to flee work, 60s and 70s factory workers, to one where in which work and our ability to maximize it has come to sit at the very core of our identity. The shift that Berardi identifies here is one from something that used to be imposed via hierarchy and was a clearly defined task performed in exchange for wages to an increasingly digital and virtual workplace in which labor becomes a much more differentiated and mental process. In the case of the latter, what it means to be productive in such a workplace is much less clear and more troubling for the South. Everyday life feels more exhausting and discomforting. It feels less and less like it is under our own personal control. Work provides one of the few viable escapes. None of the few places we fully retain our worth as individuals, independent from the denial of self implied by familial responsibility, for example. Interesting. Wait. This is horrible. I hate this. I'm going to read it again because this is fucking terrible. Work provides one of the few viable escapes or outlets, one of the few places we feel we retain our worth as individuals. I was just telling my friend that I actually enjoy traveling for work because I am like lifted up out of my responsibilities here at this home to be free in a sense. Of course, I have to do work, but like other than that, I'm free and I'm free within my work. And all I got to worry about is me. And perhaps this is why women have fallen for the trap of like the workplace as well. They've fallen for the propaganda hard because it's the one place where they can like remove the identity of mother, wife, household fucking slave and put on a different one of their choosing. They're like, oh, okay. I get to, do I want to be, what kind of slave do I want to be today? Yeah, so it feels like there's a little bit more choice there. Yikes. Yikes. It feels, let's see. Um, the contemporary worker has thrown him or herself onto the flames of experience. If there's one element of the new work that is most remarkable, it is arguably that it has become so amorphous and deterritorialized, not least with the shift towards working from home. It feels more fluid and less hierarchical because we are part of a big, less tangible whole in which network dependency comes to define us as working beings. For freedom of slave prophylicity. Yeah, I'm I choose to be a slave at work. I don't have to be like I have to be to my daughter. I get to choose to be a slave. What kind of slave do I want to be at work? The intellectualization of labor, a major effect of the technological and organizational transformation of the productive process, opens completely new perspectives for self realization. But it also opens up a field of new energies to the valorization of capital. No desire, no vitality seems to exist anymore outside the economic enterprise, outside productive labor and business. Capital was able to renew its psychic, ideological, and economic energy, specifically thanks to the absorption of creativity, desire and individualistic libertarian drives for self-realization. I think this is the same thing for the trad wife thing. It's about choice, right? Women want to choose. I want to choose to be that. What kind of slave do you want to be? Is I think the whole discussion of like the feminist like woes of today. It's about choosing what kind of slave you want to be. And I think trad wives should unite with the working women on this one. Although I would say, uh, I think we'd have a harder time convincing the trad wives that they are still slaves. I think they wouldn't care. They wouldn't care, I think, about like the working women's slavery. I think they're like, oh, well, then you should have just been a mother, you know? Andre Gores argues that the social change was such that there was hope that our quest for identity might become less dependent on work. Oh, yeah. I'm reading Bullshit Job Scriber had a joke about the guy who cleans elephant dung after the circus. Got it profound. Oh, I share it in the Discord. I want to hear it. So this, I suggest, was a misguided assessment. Work is consumption. What has happened appears to be a shift in emphasis from the end of the 20th century, in which consumption was catapulted to the top of the identity hierarchy, to the situation today in which the workplace has reasserted its influence. It's done so by reinventing itself as a place in which workers can find and rejuvenate their consumer selves. I want to reinforce the notion that our intensified experience of work illustrates how much contemporary conceptions of work have come to be tied up in how we seek to bolster the self through processes of consumption. It's perhaps Christopher Lasch who puts this most effectively. The social arrangements that support a system of mass production and consumption tend to discourage initiative and self reliance, and to promote dependence, passivity, and a spectatorial state of mind, both at work and at play. Let me read that again. The social arrangements that support a system of mass production and consumption tend to discourage initiative and self reliance, promoting dependence, passivity, and a spectatorial state of mind at work and play. Consumerism is only the other side of the degradation of work, the elimination of playfulness and craftsmanship from the process of production. Hmm. Perhaps what we're talking about here is a state of affairs in which the boundaries of between production and consumption have gradually become more blurred. Maybe the spectatorial state of mind which Lasch refers constitutes a spectatorship of the self. In other words, what the experience of work allows us to do is take a step outside of ourselves in order to perceive who we are in the most positive of lights. Now, that's something. That is an interesting speculation, because the whole Christopher Lasch is the one who wrote The Culture of Narcissism. I don't know, it's 1984. I don't know if that's what he's reading this from, but Culture of Narcissism. We talked about this. The company is narcissistic. Increasingly, individuals are narcissistic, individualized, atomized, alienated. The narcissism is heavy there. And so work creates yet another reflection pond for us to gaze upon ourselves, right? We can reflect, like, think about you at the end of your life, for the end of your day, even. What did I do? Who am I in the context of things? In the context of, like, even the greater good, who am I in my work? Yikes. What are we asking? What are you asking me? What do I know about? Pumping septic, diagnose a house like an Eastern View. I don't know what witching rods. I don't know what that is. Is that like a dowsing rod? I think I know what a dowsing rod is. I don't know what a witching rod is, though. I am abundantly conscious of how it is I work in order to construct a particular version of myself to be consumed by my colleagues. I quite often, for example, find myself wondering after a social event connected to work whether I've given too much of myself by letting my guard down and in the process undermine the carefully curated self that I've produced. Oh my God. Yes. Work is both an experience and performance, and by seeking to balance the two, we live the life that capitalism wants of us. The search for fulfilling work, the fulfillment that work as an experience can provide, is essentially a search for self. Not only that, it becomes so fundamental to who we are that when we've checked around to make sure none of our colleagues will notice we skulk off at 5 precisely, we close the door behind us in such a way that its loss feels more permanent and more scarring than ever before. This is a loss that we experience to the full. What? I don't get that last line. It becomes so fundamental to who we are that when we've checked around to make sure no one will notice we've skulked out, we close the door behind us in such a way that its loss feels more permanent. The loss of what? The loss of work? That last line just kind of threw me for a loop, but overall, great chapter. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. The loss of the thing we identified as. Oof. I don't like it. Yikes. All right, let's start on chapter 5. What time is it? 5:11. What am I doing? Jim? Yes. I'm on nobody else's time but my own. I like pumping mini mansions and witnessing the filth that could poison their own. Kelly, killing me. All right, chapter 5, technologies of self. Technology provides as the means by which we are able to create a world of our own making. Technology provides the means by which we are able to create a world of our own making. As Gabriel and Lang put it, we now inhabit a digital world. Inhabit or inhabit? A digital world in which the technologies we use transform our ways of thinking. Is that like a Freudian slip? We now inhibit a world? I think it meant to say inhabit. But the experience society is more than just a transition from the consumption of objects to experience. It's actually about a change in how consumption feels. The experience of consumption. Consumption. How does it feel to consume? Nowadays, many of us appear to live in a virtual world as much as we do a real one, a world that constitutes an alternative space in which our identities are reconstituted and reimagined. In this world, experience is everything, at least in the sense that it provides new possibilities for personalized selfhood through which we conspire to see the world through fresh experiential eyes. It's thus that the experience society has reinvented the relationship between self and consumption. Technology is the means by which the freedoms of the experience society are intensified and yet undermined at the same time. In the virtual space that technology has come to offer, the consumer is apparently liberated from the constraints of capitalism. But such liberation is nothing more than a daring falsehood. A falsehood that not only changes how we think, but what we think. And it is on this falsehood that the myth of the self he wrote in parentheses, is built. The experience society is founded on the conceit that it is through the escape technology provides that some semblance of authenticity can be procured, that by sacrificing ourselves to the virtual, we can somehow find a sense that transcends limitations of the physical world that came to be wholeheartedly defined through consumption. The experience society is, in this sense, a deeply ironic construction that offers us the world and yet tempers that world to the extent that the self we come to recognize through these means is barely any kind of self at all. How do you feel about trains? You asking me? I mean, as like modes of transportation or like in general? I don't know. The relationship between technology and consumption is a complicated one, bound up with the subtleties of social change and its ideological complications. We would perhaps like to assume that technological change might bring with it the inevitable progress in which the interests of human beings are best served. Current debates around AI and its potential to undermine what it actually means to be human might suggest otherwise. It's unclear whether AI is our mistress or our master. It is. It okay. Moreover, as already is pointed out, there has been a longstanding concern that consumption rather than production has become the organizing principle of the society in which we live in. This is part of a historical process in which the working classes have become increasingly fragmented. Not only have many jobs gradually been taken away from human beings by so called technological advancements, but class unity has been undermined in the process, partly as a result of being members of a society which says that the way to belong is through what we consume. The end product of this is a technology that perpetuates the very angst that it was perhaps designed to relieve. A world in which the relationship between work and consumption is subject to a constant process of reinvention. The role of digital technologies is especially significant. It's not that experiences are inevitably digital, but rather that the digital has become so absolutely fundamental to how the self relates to experience. Let me read that again. It's not that experiences are inevitably digital, but rather that the digital has become so fundamental to how the self relates to experience. Yikes. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of that experiences are digitized. That's the thing. Experiences will become digitized or they're through some kind of digital transformation. Like if just went on vacation, right? The experience of going on vacation. If we didn't have phones, I would have taken pictures with one of those, disposable cameras, right? And sure, the memories of that trip would be there. They'd be available. But how often prior to having I'm just wondering how often do people go back and like look at their pictures and stuff versus now? So I wonder if we're just kind of like reinforcing and creating digital memories for ourselves and just really solidifying the stories we tell ourselves. That's part of it. But yeah, no, no doubt that it's not just about the digital thing, but it's about how we're experiencing things now. What's important here is the recognition that technology is not neutral, it's ideological. There may be some logic to assuming that the freeing up of the digital world would have some significant potential for political liberation and resistance. But such an assumption would be misleading and potentially dangerous. Okay. Hold on. Okay. We're about to get weird. We're about to get real weird here, okay? Because he just said something important. He said there might be some logic to assuming that the freeing up of a digital world would have some significant potential for political liberation, but he's going to say this is a dangerous thing to ascribe to. So I'm going to have to argue. I know I'm going to have to argue to this because one of this is the thing, right? So a lot of people, this is that classic Marxist argument that like we can't do anything except have a revolution. And I just think that that's not what Marx meant, or if he thought that, I don't think that's like true. Like, I don't think that's accurate. So, if you've read The Society of the Spectacle, Guy Debord explains the spectacle and then gets at the end to the point where he kind of says, like, listen, we can't give up hope. There have to be seeds of hope in things. Like, you, and part of that hope is like the knowledge and the understanding and the sharing of that knowledge of the spectacle. So anytime people come through and they're like, there's no hope in this thing. This thing is completely, I'm like, we don't fight. So let's read what he fucking says. And then you guys can tell me whether I need to fight this guy or not, and like have him come on the podcast and we can argue about it. So there might be some logic to assuming this, but he's going to argue. Curillo notes, Kuryllo. Curillo notes that unlike in Adorno's case, Benjamin suggests that, I hate saying Benjamin because if I were to read it anywhere anybody else, I would call it Benjamin. Is it Benjamin or Benjamin? 2008. So it would be Benjamin, not Walter Benjamin. Okay, fine. So Curillo notes that unlike in Adorno's case, Benjamin suggests that within it, technological developments hold the seeds of politicization capable of liberating human beings from a life of drudgery. What do we need to cite to make people? Curillo notes that unlike in Adorno's case, Benjamin suggests do this. So like so-and-so said that unlike so-and-so, so okay, so Benjamin 2008 says that there are seeds of politicization. Okay. Benjamin argues that capitalist culture effectively creates new forms of communication based on this technology of mechanical reproduction. Is it Benjamin? Because why would it be 2008? We all look this up. Because talking about mechanical reproduction, which is Walter Benjamin, anyways, in turn lead to a breakdown in traditional distinctions between the author and the consumer. Let me read this again. Creates new forms of communication based on the technology of mechanical reproduction, which lead to a breakdown in traditional distinctions between author and consumer. True, see Roland Barthes. Such distinctions erode the power of aesthetic and create the potential for democratization. True. Hello, John Dewey. At all. From this point of view, the mass media has at least some potential as a force for positive social change. Yes, agreed. Totally agreed. But alas, the intensification of the mass media's underpinning by technology means that this is perhaps less and less likely to be delivered. Yeah. Okay. All right. True. I made a video about this a while back about the diminishing returns of being honest on social media and how I do suspect a narrowing where it's gotten and will continue to get harder and harder to say meaningful things on social media. And this is speaking to that point. Now, it's not Benjamin that's saying this. This is Miles saying that this is going to get harder and harder. I hope he's going to explain how. Have you read John Rawls? I heard that name. I thought it was through my econ class. Not really. No. I mean, I'm familiar with Rawls. I haven't really done like a lot of like an intense Rawls deep dive. on my list, of course. So, of course, over the last 80 years or so, the media has developed in unimaginable ways, but far from this process empowering the consumer, despite and perhaps partly in light of the emergence of prosumption, the opposite has been achieved. This can be partly understood as the byproduct of a set of conditions in which technology increasingly emphasizes the notion of reproduction as opposed to production. Multinational network capitalism, as we know it, is deeply complex and interlocking. It is indecipherable. Castells identified this network society, a virtual multifaceted network culture that wasn't necessarily new in the sense that it was operationalizing values that were long in the making. But what he saw emerge from all of this was a culture of the ephemeral, one that was made up of what he calls a patchwork of experiences and interests. I'm not sure why he hasn't cited liquid modernity, because this to me is liquid modernity all the way. I think reproduction in kitsch. That's what we're talking about. Not babies. Less of that kind of reproduction, actually. Such a transition. No. Okay. So the long-term process that Castells describes is one in which the consumer becomes less and less passive, more segmented and individualized. Such a transition was essential to the smooth running of a more effective, responsive economy and inevitably a more divided society. The omnipresence of experience as the new playground in which consumption takes place is a testament to the ability of that society to reinvent itself and to the vulnerability of consumers in being complicit in its effects. But the indecipherability of technology is not imparted in an abstract space. It affects how we experience our everyday lives. I've argued throughout this book, in some shape or form, all consumption is experiential, and technology plays a role in how and what we experience. At least the way we conceive of technology as a means of constructing ourselves has been reimagined. Two authors who come to mind, McCarthy and Wright, talk about consumer engagement with technology as a form of felt experience. The UI, the UX thing. They argue that a transition has occurred from the consumption of computers as products that could do things to products that operate in harmony with our needs. There's, of course, a significant design dimension. As a young PhD student, I recall the relationship I had with my first real computer, my Apple Macintosh. There was something about the hook, the touch, the interface that had a genuine effect on me. I engaged with that Mac in a way I had never engaged with a computer before nor since. Tell me about it, huh? Yeah? Did it hurt you? And on reflection, my experience of consuming the Mac was indicative. Hold on, we getting a warning here. No, not a warning. Um, uh, okay. On reflection, my experience of consuming Mac was indicative of where the consumption of computer technology was going. Importantly, the design facilitated a way of interactive engagement with technology, so technology became more integrated in my everyday life. I've been saying this forever. It's Fisher Price. I've been saying this forever. When people are like, "Oh, don't you like Apple products?" I'm like, "No, it's fucking Fisher Price to get you hooked on tech, to get you hooked on dumb tech." By the way, like, get you a fucking Android. Be a real fucking adult. Okay? Do you still need Fisher Price? No. You don't want to use your brain? Okay, well now look where you're at. Anyways, thank you for that, Steve Jobs, you punk ass bitch. So computers came to feel more human to the extent that my own mother sewed a green suede cover for my Mac so it could sleep peacefully at night. What I'm describing here can be explained as the beginnings of what Zuboff refers to as the Apple inversion, which implies a reciprocity between commercial imperatives and the interest of the consumer. Interesting. Put the blocks in the hole that match. I do it. So why did I get no, I did get a restriction. Why? I didn't do anything. What is it saying I did? What the fuck is the restriction for, you bitches? Why? Talking shit on Apple? Oh, okay. I didn't realize it's not loud. Apple heard me. They're like, we'll teach her. Wow. No, they'll lift it. They always do because they don't have any. There's like literally nothing I said. Anyway, so Okay, Shoshana Zuboff in Surveillance Capitalism. I've read this. I read the audiobook, and it was really good, but I don't remember her talking about this Apple inversion, the reciprocity between commercial imperatives and the interests of the consumer. I mean, I think this is maybe because I didn't find it to be particularly compelling, because there's always been impetus for a producer to meet the needs of the consumer. This has always been a thing. So I didn't really think that this was important. But here's a quote. It held out the promise of a new digital market form that might transcend the collision, an early intimation of a third modernity capitalism summoned by the self determining aspirations of individuals and indigenous to the digital milieu. The opportunity for my life, my way, at a price I can afford was the human promise that quickly lodged at the very heart of the commercial digital project. From iPhones to one-click ordering to massive open online courses and on-demand services to hundreds of thousands of web-based enterprises, apps, and devices. The relationship between the dream and reality of technological change was not something that could be sustained. Apple became associated with high-end design that for many was simply out of reach, and notoriously, with all their add-ons, the average consumer had no chance of affording it. As the company's finances went through the roof, so did the broader digital realm, so that our ability to dream through technology was outpaced by the ability of that technology to deliver. It's no exaggeration to suggest that the digital world is not only transforming consumption, but also how we as human beings relate to one another through the personalized platforms we construct around ourselves. For some commentators, everyday life has effectively been virtualized, so that what is constructed online is as much a contributor as who we are offline, perhaps more so. Such a state of affairs, honestly, I've talked to y'all more. I've talked to my fucking friends, probably. Some of them. Some friends. I mean, not that you guys aren't my friends, but let's be honest, we know very little about each other's like daily lives, except you guys see Charlie come in here and sometimes I hear about your work and stuff like that. But like it's real. Like we spend a lot of time doing the same shit online every day, not putting a value judgment on it, just saying it's true. Yeah, we're digital friends. Touch grass. What do you do on a daily? Toil. Yes, I know. I know, Sisyphus. I know. So such a state of affairs is characteristic of the experience insofar as technology is a feature of the rapidly changing information world. This is another sense in which the consumer is deterritorialized. His or her identity is no longer located in space, time, and a place in the sense that we used to think. Time space compression is such that the very notion of what constitutes a real self has been effectively undermined. The digital world has reinforced this process to the extent that the core self is effectively lost between what exists of an actively digital person's real and virtual self. The digital world has reinforced this to the extent that the core self is lost between what exists of an actively digital person's real and virtual self. Okay, here we go again with this like real self shit though. Maybe this is just because I've read more and I am like, and I'm kind of like over this whole authenticity shit. Um, who the fuck is your real self? And was your real self anything other than this like platonic ideal floating between different things you did? Chicago tastes like Mexican food and barbecue with a sprinkle of Asian spice. What? What did you get at the taste? I'm confused. Yeah, tell me all the good stuff you got at the taste and tell me how much you paid as well. I can't wait to hear. Um so okay, fine. In one sense, this is all about dematerialization of consumption, a shift, like I said in chapter 1, from the consumption of objects to that of experiences and an ever intensified engagement with a world beyond the material and mundane. But it isn't as straightforward as this may seem. Gabriel and Lang argue that time spent in front of a computer is actually time devoted to digital labor, characterized by the scene of a diverse and apparently yet obscurely connected band of workers tapping away on their Macs. More broadly, this can be said to represent an intensification of work. So even when we feel we've escaped the clutches of work, in practice, we still work it. In the case of downloading music, for example, services such as Napster and more talking about Napster and more recently Spotify may have opened up the world to of music to the consumer, but there's a price to pay. See Choke Point Capitalism. Given the sheer excess of options with which the digital world provides the consumer, the work this necessitates, the nature of the relationship between how we consume and who we are, is arguably put under further intense strain. Yes, we go on a gym now. Um, Hold on. Let me think about this. Let me recap this. This whole section here, this whole last section, it's talking about the digital world and how we have basically locked ourselves into this thing, this mechanism. And he he was going to talk about he was talking about there's something I wanted to argue with him about at the beginning. How this is dangerous. Let me go back. There's some logic in assuming that freeing it. Okay. So he's saying that there was no hope in the sauce, right? Like in the spectacle. I don't think he's convinced me that. I think it's still the same argument that it's overtaken everything, that it is making us feel like there is some exclusivity and totalization, but there's not. It's not total. Um, and I think as long as we remember that it's not totalizing, I think there's hope. I think the second we start to buy the illusion that there's no escape, we we fall for it. That's what I think. Okay, I'm gonna end the live on TikTok, and tomorrow I will read, same time. Wednesday, I don't think I will. I will put the lives up on TikTok when I'll be reading, but I'm gonna end it. Thank you guys for hanging out on Substack, and I'm gonna read some comments.